Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, stay with us. A great guest, Donna Cooper. She is Edward G. Rendell, the governor of the state's top policy guru, as I like to refer to her as. We'll be back in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Before we get into the content of the program, let me note the passing of Tim Russert. Mr. Russert died obviously prematurely after we taped last week's program. Nobody did the job better. He did it with distinction. He was the premier interviewer of our generation. And on another note, I want to thank the viewers around the state for watching Pennsylvania Newsmakers 10 years now. And on WGAL TV in the South Central Pennsylvania market, we're #1 in our time spot. It's not about the host. It's never about the host. It's always about you and great guests like the one we have on today. Welcome, Donna Cooper.
Great to be here.
All right, man, I'll tell you, you're once again, y'all are in the hot seat trying to meet this June 30 budget deadline. If anybody knows the answer to this question, you do. How close are you all to getting this done so that you don't have these 26,000 or 25,000 furloughs again and we have all that flap going on over the state?
Terry, I think we're very close. I think that, there's essentially 10, 11 days left, and I think we can get the budget done. The Senate Republicans and the House Democrats are working together, and they're the majority in each chamber, and that's really useful. That's a change from the past. We've had lots of meetings where the governor and the leaders have come together. I think we're very close. The real question is there a will? Is there anything that would undermine any one party's desire to meet the June 30th deadline? Right now, we're still optimistic.
Yeah. Well, look, everybody's up for, or not everybody, but half of the Senate and every member of the House that decide to run, they're up for re-election. I don't think anyone wants to hang around here in July and have the press begin to write all these stories that state government can't function. Governor Rendell has even said if you're close, if it's close, he won't do the furlough and get us all back into that. Is it your judgment then that you think, and you've been around for every one of Governor Rendell's budgets, correct? In fact, you're part of putting those budgets together.
Correct.
Do you think at this point you're closer than you were last year?
We are closer than we were last year, absolutely.
Well, that's great news.
And that's good news. And we're just hoping that the tone that we're in right now is one that will persist through the end of the month and nothing will derail us. Right now, the only thing that could derail us is politics, not substance.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. Well, part of it is good to hear. We'll see what happens with the politics. All right, I want to talk to health care. There is no doubt about it that that's been a priority for the second administration. You talked about it in the first administration. It's really a priority, for the past 2 years. The Republicans have come up with another plan that actually almost doubles the number of folks to be covered. It's a little original, in the sense that it calls for a whole bunch of clinics to be set up and that, would help cover the uninsured. But you all have agreed that you're going to postpone those conversations until the fall. Is that correct?
Well, there's not a formal agreement to that effect. In fact, there are still members in the Senate who would like to pursue a health care conversation, and those discussions are going on as we speak. Wow. And so the governor has said, look, we would like to get a health care working group formed. He's asked the leaders that every time we've met. We've begun some informal conversations with the Senate, and we hope that we still can, between now and the end of June, get a health care group going because, in fact, there are elements of the Senate Republican plan and the House Democratic plan that are really could be married.
Could be,
be careful about clinics. Remember, you can't get surgery at a clinic. So when you're really sick, a clinic doesn't get you anywhere.
But isn't that what they proposed?
Well, it's an element of what they proposed.
Well, I mean, one piece of it.
Yes.
But it's a pretty big piece of it.
It is a big piece of it, and I think it's one that numerous people have raised questions about simply because it's a primary care facility, but the real costs in health care are the acute care services.
But the real bottom line here is it seems to this observer too complicated to put together before June 30, given all the other complexities that you're going to deal with in other areas of the budget. Yes, no?
I don't think so, but I think that there are people who may feel that way who are uninitiated. I think that certain senators who are really embedded in health care, they know these issues. They're a little bit more optimistic, but I would say to the uninitiated, it seems really complicated.
All right,
so it's a stretch.
All right, we're talking with Donna Cooper, Governor Rendell's top policy advisor. We'll be back in a moment. Energy, an important subject. We'll take that up after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Donna Cooper, Governor Rendell's Secretary of Planning and Policy. She's the governor's top policy advisor. We're trying to get into something. Hopefully she'll give us some scoop here. She's avoiding doing that, but you do that well. At any rate, Donna, let's talk about the governor's energy plan. You know, he wanted 4 years, $850 million. You'd have to probably pay for that out of bonds. The Senate Republicans in particular have a 10-year plan, $650 million. Two questions. Number one, what you want to fund isn't different between the Senate and your plan. It's how much and the timing. Am I right or am I wrong about that?
Pretty much the same, and it really is how much. We believe that in order for Pennsylvania to be in the forefront of the alternative energy economy, we have to put substantial money out now. Right. 10 years, we lose the edge. There'll be other states have putting a lot of money on the table to attract and build alternative energy companies and to build a economic sector. Yeah. And we have a lot of companies that want to operate here in solar and wind and coal gasification and clean coal, and we just really need to aggressively move. A 10-year program will certainly not be a wise investment. And again, I think there are members of the Senate who are seeing the light of that, the importance of that, and beginning to think along the lines that we are.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. Given $4 gasoline, who knows what's going to happen there? We've done some programming on it in the past, figuring out, you know, what the state can do about it. Do you think that what the governor's trying to do is an integral part of helping just one state, you know, one of 50, in making us energy independent and reducing our reliance on foreign oil? Can you give me some examples of things?
Sure, if the Penn Fuel Bills passes, which is part of the energy bill, which basically puts a mandate in place on the content of gasoline being higher in terms of ethanol. Right. Not corn-based ethanol, but cellulosic ethanol. And in that case, we then are decreasing the amount we need to import. We will replace almost 1 billion gallons of gasoline that we need to import with ethanol by this bill and with biodiesel by this bill. And again, I think as the Senate Republicans had raised issues about too much corn reliance, we've said fine. We would prefer a cellulosic-based ethanol because that puts PA in the production stream. Yeah. And so this bill will put a mandate in place that moves us to those higher ethanol and biodiesel content and puts Pennsylvania in the place where it's being produced. Yeah. So we create jobs and we decrease our reliance on foreign oil.
Yeah, one of the sort of controversial features, and I know this came up in the presidential campaign, but actually more so, I think, between environmentalists and those who want to use the coal deposits for what we call clean coal, been some differences over what you can do with the waste product from coal. Presidential candidates all agree. Of course, Obama's from a big coal state. Senator Clinton was in favor of it, and I think Senator McCain is. But what kind of, are you getting a lot of concern out of the environmental community about clean coal and using these mountains of coal because of the problem with the deposits? You know,
well, I think two things. Our environmental community is very smart. First, some of our energy package, as you know, looks at using coal waste. That's correct. So if we can proceed on a coal waste strategy, that resolves part of the problem. And the second thing is we all have to be diligent to make sure that we don't expand dirty coal. Right. And so as long as we hold the line against expansion of dirty coal and say that any coal-fired power plants in Pennsylvania need to begin to drive down their CO2 emissions, we're all on the same page. We're pretty clear we need to have domestic sources of energy, and keeping Pennsylvania in the production mix, not just as a buyer but a generator, is important.
Okay, before we go to break, one last question. What again, how does that, can you get this done by June 30, and what is the, is there a compromise in store here?
Again, Terry, we've had terrific discussions with the House Democrats and the Senate leadership on both sides of the aisle, and the House Republicans, and the House Republicans have been very active in the conservation conversation. So all four caucuses are pretty much trying to get this done by June 30th, and we remain optimistic. Again, there is not a huge substantive divide. So the only thing that will derail this is a desire to derail it for the purpose of politics. Okay, we're talking with Donna Cooper, Governor Rendell's top policy advisor. Education,
There's a proposal that would increase education funding by $2.6 billion over 6 years. We'll see where that stands after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program again with Donna Cooper, Governor Rendell's top policy advisors. I'll be able to get that all. I want to do two things here in the remaining time that we get to spend together. $2.6 billion. Senate Republicans say, maybe we'll give you a 40% of that. That's a lot of money. It's not what you want. What's the administration's response to that?
Oh, we're very disappointed.
Is that half a loaf? Not good enough.
It's not good enough. Absolutely not.
Tell me why.
Well, Pennsylvania has historically underfunded its schools. We have the revenues to support the 6-year rollout of the money that the legislature's own costing out study said was necessary. Mm-hmm. They did a study. Their study says we need to significantly increase the funding for 474 of the 501 school districts, that they are underfunded. We are not going to make progress in getting the kids who are furthest behind ready to enter college and ready to enter work without the resources. Mm-hmm. So absolutely the Senate vote yesterday, which took the funding from 291 and lopped 120 million off the top, was an irresponsible vote in our estimation, and one that will cause, Terry, not just us to lose progress academically, but it's going to cause property tax rates to increase. The reason property taxes rise in Pennsylvania is not because school costs are rising fast, it's because the state is not carrying its fair share.
Well, that's been true for a long time. Maybe since the 1980s, it used to be something close to 50-50.
Absolutely, and we need to get back there.
34%.
We're at 36. If we do
we
do the proposal that the legislature's own costing out study said, we'll get up to 45%, and that's where we need to be. The state needs to carry its share of school funding.
Does this hold up? Here, my favorite question for Donna Cooper. Yes. Does this hold up the budget beyond June 30?
Well, again, we believe that because the House Democrats feel as strongly as we do, and there are, two chambers that legislation has to go through, that we believe that we will make progress and negotiate a solution on education. But it is not going to be a solution that looks like yesterday's Senate vote cutting $120 million out of the education budget.
All right, and then we don't have time, but I've had Ron Cow, who heads the Education Policy and Leadership Center, talking about this debate over the formula, the funding formula, about equalizing. Maybe sometime you'll come back this summer and we'll have a chance. We can get into that, how some school districts get more, some get less. But before you go, I want to ask you about graduation requirements. Typically in our state, under state law, that's a responsibility of the State Board of Education. Now the legislature is getting its little bony fingers into this mess, not mess, but into this whole business of setting graduation requirements. Who should set graduation requirements? Let me start with you.
Well, to the contrary, what the legislature wants to do is stop the state board from setting
Well, but they want to get involved in...
Well, they say they want to get involved. I think that they want to pass a law that stops the state board, and they will not get involved. And what that means is the status quo.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Why should, if the legislature wants to tell the state board it should not set graduation requirements, or they want to stop this particular proposal, then why don't they just do it themselves, and we can have a big debate over that?
Because it will be very messy, because the employer community is very concerned about the fact that we have 44,000 kids graduating each year, or close to 30% of our kids graduating unable to do reading and math, even at 11th grade level, let alone 12th. So it'll be a messy fight that I think the legislature doesn't want to be in the middle of, but they also, at this point, are very concerned that the School Boards Association and the teachers' unions are advocating to stop the state board regs that passed unanimously.
Okay, is this something that is going to get resolved here before the budget is?
No, I think not.
This is something we can talk about later. We'll get you back and get some other folks on, because I think this is an important topic. Who gets to decide that? Who should decide it? Is a pretty important. You think that's a pretty important question?
Is, should we have a standard approach to high school graduation requirements in the state? That's the question.
Thanks. Donna Cooper was our special guest. Coming up, Pete DeCoursey, one of the state's leading journalists. We're going to get his take on what's going on in the Pennsylvania legislature when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back for our continuing discussion about legislative matters with Pete DeCoursey with Capitolwire.com. He's one of the state's leading journalists. Peter, as always, welcome. All right, let's. I want to cover a whole bunch of ground. Furlough workers. Governor Rendell says, well, maybe I don't have to do this if we're close. What's your sense about how close, as I asked Donna Cooper, they are? You've been covering this for months now.
I tend to agree with Donna. I think it's possible they could do it. I think the key is going to be that the governor is going to have to accept less spending that he wants. He wants to add a $1.1 billion to the current budget of $27 billion plus.
What's he want to spend that new money on?
On his $300 million, almost $300 million for education. The Senate wants to spend more than $100 million less on education, and they want to clamp down on these other programs that he wants to do. And again, some of this is just a simple inflationary increase. As he points out, inflation is now 4% and above, which means that you take $27 billion, you're talking about just inflation gets you to 1.1. And he's going to, but again, I think the Senate is going to look much closer to $800 million. So you've got a $300 million gap. Now, the good news for the governor is that one of the big areas of argument is education. And as you know, the story of public education basic funding is that the legislature always funds more at the end. They economize elsewhere. So that's the one plus the governor has going for him. That's his biggest argument, and that's one place where the southeastern Republicans always kind of go to their guys to their leaders at the end and go, come on.
Put a little more money on the table for education. So you think that it's basically going to come down to a couple of items in the budget where the governor has recommended more spending, legislature, Senate Republicans, let's pick the real sort of stopping point because the Senate controlled by Republicans.
And a lot of House Republicans.
But they may or may not be able to stop what the House does. No. So it's mostly in the Senate ours. All right, but all these other things you think are relatively minor and that we have a 50-50 chance of getting the budget done? Certainly by the 4th weekend, maybe the July 4th weekend?
I think by the July 4th weekend or the week after that it'll be done because the governor has the National Governors Association coming in for their centennial meeting.
So we'll see.
But I think the key problem they're going to have, Terry, though, is that the first year of $300 million additional education funding is not the fight. As you pointed out in the earlier segment, it's the next 5 years and the $2.3 billion more. I think the governor is going to may have to settle this budget without getting a commitment in law for the next 5 years, which he really wants.
Well, he really does, and that's that study of education
and
funding.
And that's what could hold us up is not the this year funding, it's the commitment to do 5 more years of it.
I want to turn to politics, something that you cover prolifically, let me say. I think that's your first love anyway. Now, you can argue about policy, but politics is your first love. As you know, if you make a campaign expenditure in this state, as part of a campaign committee, you've got to make your donors how much you gave and who your donors are above a certain threshold. So we all know who's giving to these campaigns. But
we all knew.
We all knew. I'm heading there. But that's not true for certain kinds of commercials that are now run in which you don't have to identify the donors who gave the money to run the commercial as long as you don't, and I'll let you fill in the gaps.
As long as you don't use the magic words, which essentially mean elect, support, defeat. There are a bunch of words that are contained in a 30-year-old Supreme Court decision called Buckley versus Vallejo. Until last year, we had a stronger law than the Fed law, and we said that if you do anything to affect an election with money, you have to file a campaign report and disclose your donors. A group from Virginia came in and said, we're going to sue you because your law is unconstitutional. You're violating people's free speech rights with your too tough law.
All right, now let me get this straight. So here's what we're saying. If I'm in a group, not a political action committee, let's say, or maybe it could be, and I want to go and say Pete DeCoursey is a rat, but I don't say don't elect Pete DeCoursey or don't support Pete DeCoursey.
I think if you call me a rat, but if you said, tell Pete DeCoursey how you feel about abandoning the soldiers in Iraq.
Okay.
That ad does not say defeat me. If I'm an elected official, it doesn't say any of those things. And so a group from Virginia brought in an ad in 2007 saying, thank Judge Maureen Lally Green, who just happened to be running for Supreme Court 3 days later, or a week later after they started running the ad. And she was a Superior Court judge here in Pennsylvania running for Supreme Court. Thank her. Now, the only way that people could thank her, obviously, was to show up and vote for her.
So you don't say, in other words, they're either sort of...
The state goes and says you can't run that ad.
Right.
The state judge says, well, I can't grant you emergency relief. The federal court judge says Tom Corbett signed an agreement that allowed them to, that literally changed Pennsylvania election law from you have to disclose everything to you only have to disclose your donors if you use the magic words, which is a much lower standard.
I want to understand this. So, in other words, what you're saying now is that we could see in this state television commercials that either support a candidate if they don't use the magic words, attack a candidate, or make a candidate look bad, and we as consumers of these ads will not know who's paying for them. Is this what you're saying?
We could not know. And in fact, John Morganelli, who's running against Mr. Corbett, could run an ad saying, tell Mr. Corbett how you feel about his allowing people to secretly donate. And you know what? He could do that secretly. He could do that without revealing.
And the people who paid for that wouldn't have to know. That somehow that doesn't seem right. I mean, in this era of transparency.
Now, Mr. Corbett says, no, I didn't do that. It's not about the stipulation. It's about the law. But the federal judge who wrote the decision said it was all about Corbett's stipulation. Now, obviously, that's not going to be as big an issue as his handling of bonus-gate in the election, but it is, in some ways, a bigger thing, because this could affect every state election, Terry. It could affect people running for all three row offices.
This is huge.
And it could affect governor.
This is huge. We're out of time, because we could get all kinds of commercials being run. We won't know who's paying for them. Somehow that has to be changed. Does that get changed in state law? We're almost out of time.
Yes, it can be.
All right, hopefully it will be.
The governor wants it to be.
All right, thanks for watching Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.